So Dr. Curtis Wall, chiropractor in Calgary, he tried to comply with this. He never dealt with this before. He's a chiropractor. They don't normally wear masks. It's not like he's a nurse or a doctor. He tried to wear one, but he discovered that it caused claustrophobia and anxiety. So I asked the expert this across examination, like, why did you talk about bacteria and the Manchurian pie? He's like, oh, I was just having fun. Well, then what the college is doing is they're imposing something on their members, on their chiropractors, that is unhealthy. Okay? And they're saying, look, do this or you lose your license.
Tamara Ugolini here with Rebel News, bringing you a court case that has been argued in the matter of a chiropractor simply trying to run his practice throughout the COVID hysteria, who was facing what his lawyer referred to as unlawful discipline from his regulatory college, the College of Chiropractors of Alberta. See, back in the spring of 2020, Dr. Curtis Wall had harmful and scientifically unproven working conditions imposed on him by the college that was trying to suspend his license for simply exercising his lawful right of a mask exemption. And today I'm going to catch up with his lawyer, Mr. James Kitchen, to get a summary of the proceedings and what the experts testified when it came to the mask science. Kitchen is a chief litigator at Liberty Coalition Canada, an organization that is dedicated to upholding liberty, human rights, and constitutional freedoms. He has represented Dr. Wall through the Liberty Defense Fund at no cost to him. You can find out more at libertycoalitioncanada.ca. Without further ado, here is Mr. Kitchen's summary of Dr. Wall's case. Check it out.
So in May 2020, like a lot of health regulatory bodies, the College of Chiropractors of Alberta imposed a number of mandates upon its members, to ostensibly stop the spread of COVID. One of these was a mandatory mask rule, right? So no exceptions, all chiropractors have to wear masks when they're treating their patients. So Dr. Curtis Wall, chiropractor in Calgary, he tried to comply with this. He never dealt with this before. He's a chiropractor. They don't normally wear masks. It's not like he's a nurse or a doctor. He tried to wear one, but he discovered that it caused claustrophobia and anxiety. A lot of people can relate to that. I dealt with a lot of that over the last 2.5 years. It's a common symptom of masks, and we now know why with the oxygen deprivation and the carbon dioxide toxicity. It causes those types of symptoms in a lot of people. So he experienced that, tried to wear it, and he thought, you know what, this isn't working. This isn't good for my mental health or my physical health. It's not good for my patients. I can't provide good care. I'm not going to wear it. So this goes on for 6 months. And then in December 2020, someone complains, as we've had a lot of course, and someone complained to AHS, Alberta Health Services. They, of course, then informed the College of Chiropractors in Alberta. And the college contacted Dr. Wall, said, what are you doing? You're not wearing a mask. He said, look, I can't. I got these mental disability issues. They said, too bad, put on the mask or we're going to suspend your license. And he said, well, look, I can't. So he got a doctor's note from a physician in Calgary, provided it to the college, and they still said, no, we don't care. We don't recognize any duty to accommodate you. Put on the mask or we take your license. So sure enough, within a week or two in December 2020, they applied to take away his license on an interim basis. And just so people understand, this type of thing is reserved for when professionals like lawyers or doctors or whoever are stealing money, coming to work intoxicated, raping their staff and clients. That's what that's reserved for. Unfortunately, we have a lot of sexual misconduct amongst professionals, as some people may know. And so, we take away their licenses on an interim basis in the public interest, right, to keep people safe. So it's really rare, extreme stuff for when you do that to a professional. That's what the college was trying to do to Dr. Wall, simply because he wasn't wearing a mask. Really outrageous. This is when I got involved. The college was not successful in taking away his license. So then they initiated regular proceedings against him to accuse him of professional misconduct, right? So they're trying to find him of being unprofessional, and then we'll discipline him for that, perhaps even suspend his license, take it away, whatever, right? So as part of his defense, of course, what do? Dr. Wall and I, well, we put in the evidence, we put in the experts, right? So we put in Chris Schaefer, occupational health and safety expert, to show that masks are harmful, right? For the reasons I said, they're toxic to people. And then we put in a number of medical scientists to show how they are ineffective. They don't work, right? So for example, we had Dr. Byron Bridle, right? And people probably know who he is by now, right? He's an immunologist at the University of Guelph. Really, really knowledgeable guy. I got to question him for 4 or 5 hours and draw out all this evidence about how useless masks are. And so that was the case. We just said, here's the truth, here's the science. And if this is the truth and this is the science, then you are violating as chiropractors statutory human rights and constitutional rights to not wear a mask. And we don't have a decision yet, but that's a high-level overview of how the case went and the defense that Dr. Wall put up.
I want to get back a little bit to some of the transcripts. And when you noted also, up until recently, there was a publication ban. So can you elaborate on what happened there with the college and how you ended up refuting this publication ban to release the names of, like you've already mentioned, some of these experts?
Sure. So between September 2021 and January 2022, we had 8 days of hearing, and most of this was evidence from experts. So the college got an expert. They initially didn't have one. We had a hearing set for July 2021. They had to adjourn. They didn't have an expert yet. Dr. Wall had 4. So we went through that. Dr. Wall put in his 4 experts. That took quite a few days to get through that. The college put in their expert, a local physician from Alberta. I got to cross-examine him. That was very fun. He made 2 retractions of his initial report, actually. So when all that was finished in February 2022, I said to the college, look, Dr. Wall is going to exercise his constitutional rights to free expression and to a public and fair and open hearing to publish all the materials in this case. And I said, but for now, we're just gonna limit that to the expert reports and the expert transcripts, like the transcripts of questioning, right? Because the public needs to be able to see this. They need to see the scientific evidence on masks. Right, a lot of times it's just in tidbits and it's in the media and it's spun. You know, in legal proceedings, you have hours and hours and hours of cross-examination and experts that are given the floor and able to talk. So you get much better quality evidence, right? So people need to be able to see that transcripts, right? There's 1,200 pages of transcripts in this case that show that masks are useless and harmful. But the college responded to that by saying, no, you can't do that. We want to keep all this secret. Okay, so they applied for a number of publication bans. First, it was to remove all the names of everybody involved except for Dr. Wall and his own experts, which is bad enough, but okay, fine. We want to keep those people secret because who knows, maybe they'll be harassed online because they said things they shouldn't have. So whatever. But then when Dr. Wall did eventually publish these expert transcripts, right, and he mentioned the fact that he had people like Chris Schaefer and Dr. Byron Bridle and local respirologist Bio Dang as his experts. He mentioned these names, which is totally lawful to do. The college responded by saying, no, you're not even allowed to talk about your own expert witnesses. And that was really an egregious step too far. So they made everybody and everything secret at that point, right? The only thing I could do was publish transcripts that had every name of everybody involved redacted, which is kind of ridiculous. And it made a mess of the transcripts, of course. Mm-hmm. So fine, we published the transcripts. We went to closing argument, and I gave my submissions on why all this is a big waste of time. And then after that was done, I said, okay, we're going to the court now about this publication ban issue because this is totally unlawful. So as soon as I did that, as soon as I served a court application on the college, they said, well, we don't want to go to court about this. We'll just give you what you want, right? Which is great. I was really glad to see that. Obviously, they're implicitly admitting that what they did was unlawful, and now we're actually getting the veil of secrecy lifted off this case. But it's also really frustrating that that's what it takes, right? You see this all the time, of course, right? These government bodies act as unlawful as they can, and it's only when it might get exposed or they might get dragged into court that they finally start following the law. And I'm glad to see them follow the law. I'm glad to see this win for free expression in this case, and I'm glad to see that the science of masks will not be so secret because of what the College of Chiropractors of Alberta has done. But I sure wish they had followed the law to begin with.
Now, speaking of the science of masks, because the transcripts, there's so much to sift through there, to read through. There's hundreds of pages of submissions. What were some of the most compelling submissions and the evidence submitted by these experts? And then I'd also love if you could touch on what the redactions or the retractions were from the sole witness that the college sought out.
Well, I'll do the retractions first. That's probably the funnest thing. In the report that this expert had done, he was talking about bacteria. He's talking about the Manchurian plague. He's talking about how masks were effective back then. kind of like, that's a pretty juvenile mistake, something that like a first-year biology undergrad student might do. Because as anybody with any kind of science background knows, bacteria are large in the biological world. They're hundreds or thousands of times bigger than viruses, right? Bacteria, like you can see it, it's a cell, right? Viruses are just strips of RNA with like a lipid around it. And you need like an electron microscope to see that thing, right? So the magnitude of it is totally different, right? So a mask often does actually stop bacteria because they're large. It doesn't stop viruses because they're really tiny. And there was hundreds of pages of evidence from Dr. Byron Bridle and another expert that Dr. Wall had that talked about what we call the mechanics of how masks work, right? So you have sort of the clinical side, all the clinical evidence that show after all the studies they did that they don't work, but you can just talk about it at a mechanical level, right? If the virus is this big and the holes in the masks are this big, the smallest ones or the biggest ones, then it just isn't going to work. It's pretty obvious, right? So I asked the expert this across examination, like, why did you talk about bacteria and the Manchurian? He's like, I was just having fun. He's an expert, right? Being paid whatever he's being paid to be here in this very serious proceeding where somebody could lose their license to practice chiropractic. He's a doctor. He's a member of the CPSA in Alberta, so he himself is a professional, and he says he's just having fun. As a lawyer, you always see things you don't see coming, but that one really. So he retracted it. I didn't even have to ask him. He's like, I was just having fun. We'll just take that right out of my report. Completely cavalier. Then the other thing is, and this is a bit technical, so I won't get into too many details, but he basically accused one of Dr. Wall's experts of making sort of like a ridiculous mistake. And what really happened is this expert for the college changed the numerator in an equation without changing the denominator, right? So imagine you have a half cup. Well, if you change the top number to 2, all of a sudden you have a whole cup, right? So you got to, if you're going to have equations, you have to change the bottom number, not just the top number. I know that's technical, but math people will immediately recognize like the juvenile mistake to be made there, right? And so I pushed him on it. Eventually he retracted because he had insulted the other professional, accused him of being basically like stupid. So when he finally realizes the mistake that he had made on cross-examination, he retracted his accusations towards the other expert. So that was very interesting. You'll see these in the transcripts. They're on the website of Liberty Coalition Canada, which, by the way, is the advocacy organization that's actually paying for the legal fees in this case. And it's through them that this case is being publicized. So I encourage people to go to the Liberty Coalition Canada website. You can read these transcripts. Just briefly, the things that really stuck out for me about how useless masks were again, the mechanical analysis, as we've talked about, right? I mean, I'm sure people on your show and other shows have talked about the obvious common sense knowledge that, look, using a mask to stop the SARS-CoV-2 virus is like throwing Skittles through a chain link fence, right? We've heard that that is actually scientifically accurate. That's what the expert said. So that was big. The other big thing is that, all the experts for Dr. Wall made it very clear, look, masks have never worked for this type of thing in the past. It's really obvious why. Masks stop big droplets of spit, obviously. They don't stop aerosols, right? And we all know this as Canadians. We go out in the winter, we breathe, right? That's the aerosols. The big spit pieces go to the ground. That's fine. Masks will stop those. SARS-CoV-2 is transmitted mostly through aerosols. We've known this since the beginning. It's just been censored most of the time, right? So another big reason why masks don't work. It's really actually intuitive. And then the last thing that really stuck out, of course, was the evidence of Chris Schaefer, who said, look, when you put on a mask, the type of masks that we're using, okay, we're not using gas masks that actually allow air to flow. We're using these stupid little polyurethane blue things most of the time. That's what the college mandated. When you put that type of thing on, you're blocking oxygen, right? Your oxygen drops below a certain level, it's hazardous, right? He's an occupational health and safety expert. Like, we're talking hazardous, that has a meaning, right? That means it's dangerous to your health, okay? And he gave testimony about testing that he had done that shows once you put on a mask, within 2 minutes, your oxygen drops below what is acceptable, okay? It's hazardous, such that if it was happening in a work environment, OHS, Occupational Health and Services in Alberta, would shut that workplace down. And he also showed about how the carbon dioxide that builds up inside is 20 times the acceptable
limit as identified by Health Canada, right? Why do we all get headaches? Why do we all have fatigue? Why do we all feel dizziness? Why do some people pass out? Why do we have all these why do we have these issues when we wear masks? Because we're breathing in 20 times the acceptable level of carbon dioxide, right? So masks are dangerous and they don't work scientifically. That's not merely rhetoric. And that was really obvious in the evidence in this case for the tribunal. And it's really obvious for anybody who takes the hours to actually read through the transcripts, as I would encourage anybody to do if they're interested in this. If we go with the actual science and the truth that the masks are dangerous and don't work, well, then what the college is doing is they're imposing something on their members, on their chiropractors, that is unhealthy, okay? And they're saying, look, do this or you lose your license. Okay, so it's a violation of informed consent, first of all, right? And it's also just a violation of plain rights to bodily autonomy, security of the person, to work in safe conditions, right? So Dr. Wall has a right to be accommodated under the Alberta Human Rights Act for mental disabilities, right? The anxiety and claustrophobia he experienced. So if the college says, no accommodations, will take away your license if you don't do it, it's a violation of the Alberta Human Rights Act. It's discriminatory, okay? So there's that. The next thing is constitutional rights. Okay, so Dr. Wall has a right under Section 7 of the Charter to have his body be safe. You know, the college as a government body can't tell somebody, whether it's a chiropractor or a citizen, to do something to their body that violates their bodily autonomy and puts themselves in danger. Regardless of like the extremity of the danger, right? Any danger is a violation of Section 7 of the Charter, the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. So I think that's relevant. I focused on the human rights aspect because that was just simpler, but that constitutional aspect is there. Another interesting part of the case is the college was actually trying to discipline Dr. Wall for not telling his patients that masks work, okay? That is compelled speech, right? So the college is saying to Dr. Wall, if you don't say what we say, even though it's untrue, we're going to discipline you professionally. In other words, say what we say you must say, and if you don't, we'll discipline you. That's compelled speech, okay? That's highly unlawful. That's actually one of the few things that courts in this country continue to really care about when it comes to individual rights and liberties is the idea of free expression and no compelled speech. So that was a constitutional right that was engaged in this case, free expression, right? The ability to talk about the fact that masks don't work and that, you don't need to wear one. If you do, it's going to harm you and it's not going to stop COVID. So I argued about that as well. So, if the college sides with me, they're going to make a number of findings about how the college acted discriminatorily and violated Dr. Wall's constitutional rights, and that obviously he didn't act unprofessionally, right? Because he actually followed the truth, he followed the science, he did what was right. And what really happened is the college was acting unlawful, and in acting unlawfully, they were persecuting somebody who was acting lawfully because they disagreed with them on the COVID narrative.
Well, I look forward to seeing how the judge rules in this case, and I hope that we can do an update when that finally comes in. Just when are you hoping that this ruling will take place?
I hope to get a decision before the end of the year. Closing submissions were in June. So, let's say 6 months. I mean, it's a big case. So let's say 6 months to get a decision. It would be the end of the year. I'd hope for that. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if it's into next winter on cases like this that are politically sensitive and have a lot of evidence. It's often a 6, 9, 12-month wait to get a decision. So I don't expect one anytime soon.
Many of us questioned the mask science and questioned authority as to why exemptions were not being honored.
Feeling that you have to be guilty if you protect your individual freedoms in the name of some fake notion of collective responsibility.
It's not up to the government to decide who lives in fear and who doesn't.
It's especially interesting to note that the self-appointed prosecutor for the college alluded to the irrelevancy of Dr. Wall's defense. They tried to argue that it was his fault that the college had spent over $200,000 on prosecuting him, to which Mr. Kitchen applied to the tribunal seeking the removal of the prosecutor under prosecutorial misconduct. A few weeks later, like rats fleeing a sinking ship, the prosecutor gave his 2 weeks' notice that he was retiring from the college on April 13th. Please stay tuned for updates. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. This is the kind of coercive bullying that Western University and the University of Toronto have imposed on students by mandating third doses, a COVID booster, for anyone attending campus this fall. It's why we've partnered with the registered Canadian charity called the Democracy Fund to crowdfund litigation against this egregious and unscientific policy at noforcedboosters.com. At that special website, you can sign our petition and donate to help offset the cost of legal fees for select onboarded clients, some of which have already effectively litigated to have their rights upheld. That website again is noforcedboosters.com.